In order form for the notes that accompany this series, please contact BBC Education Information on 081 746 1111. And if you'd like a colourful poster giving details of all our geography programmes for secondary schools, please ring once again BBC Education Information. Now on BBC Two, Lifeschool. This programme for teenagers deals with the risks of catching HIV and is not suitable for young children. Teachers are advised to record and preview the programme before use in the classroom.
Have you changed your behaviour at all because of it?
No.
Not at all?
But I should.
I'm engaged and I've got a baby on the way, so I'm very safe.
Yeah, I've got a son who's got it.
Our first task was to find out the facts about HIV, what it is and how it's passed on. So we met up with Dr. Sandy McMillan at Edinburgh's Royal Infirmary.
HIV is the virus that actually causes AIDS. Many people with HIV have absolutely no clinical signs or symptoms of the disease until very late on in the illness. It's a virus that actually attacks certain cells of the immune system, the body's defense mechanism, and allows infections that you or I would be able to shrug off to take a hold and cause disease, such as pneumonias. We see that in very, very late stage disease, usually many years after infection with the virus.
How can you get HIV?
HIV is present in certain bodily fluids, particularly blood, semen, vaginal secretions, and in breast milk. So the most likely means of acquisition of HIV is through sharing of syringes and needles contaminated with blood from an HIV-infected individual, followed very closely by sexual contact, both straight and gay sex. Other means of transmission are much less likely, and for example, sharing of cups, tattooing by a registered tattooist, ear piercing with sterile equipment, swimming pools, constitute absolutely no risk of HIV infection.
Our hometown of Edinburgh and the surrounding Lothian region has the highest rate of HIV in the country. Why is this so? And does the rest of the UK have something to learn from the experience in the Scottish capital?
The reason we've got a particular problem with HIV and AIDS in Lothian really goes back to the early 80s, when there were a lot of young people starting to inject drugs for the first time. A lot of heroin arrived in Edinburgh. They were injecting without much knowledge of how to look after themselves. They didn't know much about the risks, and they shared needles a lot. There's certainly evidence that people have changed their behaviour. There's much less injecting now than there was a few years ago in Edinburgh. Those people who are injecting are sharing less than they were. There are also quite good evidence that gay men have changed their behaviour and are taking much more notice of the AIDS risk and using safer sex. But the real problem is among the heterosexual population. There hasn't been that much change in behaviour. In fact, in Edinburgh, in Scotland as a whole, more people are now getting infected through unprotected heterosexual intercourse than by any other means. So there is definitely a risk to the heterosexual population. It may have been overestimated to start with because we weren't that clear how often heterosexual people change partners and how rapidly this infection would spread. But there's no doubt that the epidemic is going to go on. It may just go on at a slightly slower rate than we thought it would originally.
However, there is a small number of experts who believe that there will never be an HIV epidemic in the heterosexual population. We arranged to meet one of these so-called AIDS dissidents who claims that HIV statistics are misleading, as heterosexuals with the virus fall into distinct and separate groups.
I mean, there are, as you know, essentially three different groups. One of those who are partners of at-risk, recognised at-risk groups, that is, they're partners of intravenous drug users or partners of bisexuals. And the second is that they have come from other countries where AIDS is very common, particularly sub-Saharan Africa. And then the last group are those who have acquired the infection heterosexually, who don't fall into either of those two groups. And that last number is very small. So what you're having is not an epidemic spread, but sporadic spread.
You've been known to criticise the way young people are taught about HIV and other sexually transmitted diseases. but surely we should be learning about the way to protect ourselves.
There is no point in disturbing the innocent mind of young 13 and 14-year-olds about the dangers associated with this disease, and indeed the sort of rather unsalubrious methods by which it can be caught, if their likelihood of contracting it is virtually non-existent, or is non-existent.
Non-existent? That wasn't what we've been hearing from other doctors. So we decided to get another view from a research scientist at the Public Health Laboratory. What did he think of the unusual opinions of these AIDS dissidents?
I think it's tragic that they're pushing out a message that people cannot get heterosexually infected in this country. There is no doubt in my mind that people are being infected by heterosexual intercourse within the UK. HIV is not very similar to other infectious diseases in that we're looking at a much longer time frame, and we're looking at the build-up of cases acquired heterosexually into the next century, and it's important that we try and prevent those now. On average, it's 10 years from acquisition of the virus to development of AIDS, so we're talking about a very long time period. If we look at this graph, it shows the total number here, but it shows the epidemic amongst gay men and the heterosexually acquired cases and projected cases amongst injecting drug users. But you can see the epidemic amongst gay men is thought to be levelling off, whereas there is an ongoing rise in the number of heterosexually acquired cases.
Well, I definitely can see Dr. Barry Evans' point, yeah. And I can see certain points of Dr. Lithun's point, but there's certain points I have to disagree with him.
But the thing that really annoyed me about Dr. Lithanu was that he said, oh, you don't need education, you know, people are learning too much about it.
Fair enough, the figures aren't as high as it thought would be. People expected to have like AIDS and HIV, but that's probably because there has been education and people have learned. So I mean, it's like because they've been successful in educating people, it's like the authorities are being punished.
Yeah. And I don't know one person that's our age that disagrees with education on HIV and AIDS.
I mean, what harm can it do?
Yeah.
People are not all in stereotyped categories. They do mix, and they are going to like have sex with like different groups as he put it. So I mean, it definitely can spread from like, I mean, it just takes like one gay person to sleep with a bisexual person, and it's into the heterosexual
population.
Yeah, I mean, one night stands with people at your work, at school, or whatever, you know. I mean, people you could bump into in a nightclub, you never know.
Will medical science ever be able to get rid of HIV and AIDS? How close are we to a cure for the disease? Our next visit then was to Dr. Jonathan Weber, a leading researcher in this field.
It's a slightly depressing time at the moment in terms of cures or vaccines. So if we start with treatments or cures first, we haven't got anywhere near a cure. So someone infected with the virus, we can't really get rid of the virus in the body. So ultimately those people will become ill and will get AIDS. The problems with vaccine development are that it's not easy to generate a powerful or potent immune response to the virus itself. That there's no real animal model for this virus. There's no animal experiments we can easily do, which has been the case for all other human vaccines we've got. There's been no easy model. And the virus is just so variable and so able to mutate that it's extremely difficult to be able to predict that we'll get a single vaccine which will truly protect people against the viruses which are out there.
With no cure or vaccine on the horizon, the best method of beating HIV is through education. We went to sit in on an upfront sex education session organised by Lothian Health Board.
This is called the risk game. What we've got is we've got a continuum running right across the floor here, running from very high risk all the way down to no risk. So I've got a pile of cards here, and on each card there's a type of activity. So I want each of you to take a card and read out the activity and make a decision for yourself about where that activity lies on that line.
man-to-man homosexual relationship? Well, it depends.
Right, what does it depend on?
Well, it depends if they use contraceptive, and it depends if the relationship's sexual as well.
Uh-huh.
Because although they're homosexual, they might not even practice anal sex or whatever.
Uh-huh. Good point.
So it's a question mark on where it goes.
One important point to remember about this and lots of other activities is that it's not who you are that matters in terms of transmitting HIV or catching HIV. It's what you do. It's what you do that matters, not who you are.
Regularly using heroin, obviously, the high risk.
No, I disagree with that. It's right. Because using clean needles, and that you're the only person using that needle. But if you share needles, that's when the risk starts.
I think that's absolutely right. What about giving mouth-to-mouth resuscitation? Hugging a person with AIDS? No risk. These are the three bodily fluids where HIV is known to be infective, and condoms provide a barrier between one body infecting another. Condoms provide a rubber barrier. It stops the fluids from passing through. Has everybody seen condoms at least?
Yeah.
Right, does anybody want to open these up? Let's have a look at how you use condoms. Getting rid of the air bubble is really important.
Yeah.
It's got a teat on the end. And that's the teat, as somebody says, that's the teat. It's designed that way so that the teat collects the sperm. When the man ejaculates, the sperm goes into that teat so that it's got somewhere to go. That's why it's important that that isn't full of air, that that's empty waiting for the sperm.
I was just wondering if the issue of HIV worries you.
It does. I've had a test and I'm thoroughly negative.
Good show. Do you think there's enough publicity and education on the subject?
I don't think there's enough education on sex, full stop.
Just got one partner, my husband, so I don't have any worries about it for myself, but obviously sex education for my child growing up is very important.
Do you think there's enough education and publicity on HIV and AIDS?
No, I don't think so for some of the young people. I think they go out and they think, oh, it can't happen to me, you know.
Do you have children yourself? Would you educate them?
Well, I have a boy, he's now 32, you know,
All right,
and
yes.
I used to say to him, you know, if you're ever going out, remember and take your condom.
I'm standing here in the waiting room of the Edinburgh GUM clinic. This is where people can come to take an HIV test. I'm not actually going to take the test myself, but I'm feeling a bit nervous just standing here. In a minute I'll be finding out exactly what it involves. So what happens when someone requests a test for HIV?
Right, well, I think the first thing we would do would sit down and talk it through with them and chat through really the reasons for wanting a test. And if they decide to go ahead, we take a blood test. We're just starting a same-day results service, which people have been very much appreciated, I think, because it shortens the waiting time. I think one of the most important things for people coming here is a concern with confidentiality.
Yeah.
And of course we ensure everyone that any testing down here is completely confidential. Whereas of course many GPs offer an HIV testing service, and the only thing against that is of course that if you have an HIV test done at your local doctor's, it does go down in your GP's medical records. It has been known very occasionally for people to be turned down for life insurance just because someone had said they had taken an HIV test in the past.
I get the impression talking to people that a lot of people don't use condoms.
I'm sure a lot of people intend to bother, but when it does come to a situation, they don't bother.
Say you had a one-night stand, right? You were drunk and everything. What would you do, right? You didn't use a condom or anything. What would you do? Would you go for a test to see?
You probably say, oh, I probably haven't got it, you know, I don't get things like that.
The way I see it, if you have HIV, if you're still fit, then you're better not knowing about it. Personally, I wouldn't want to know about it until after.
If I had a one-night stand and didn't use a condom, I'd want to go for a test.
Rather than having to go for the test, you're as well being safe in the first place. Do you know what I mean? If everyone was careful, then you wouldn't have to go for a test.
I got a test done for my GP in 1984. And how I got HIV was through my late husband, who slept with a woman who was full-blown, and that's how I got it. Not through drugs, because it was...
Milestone House in Edinburgh is the only hospice in Scotland for people living with HIV and AIDS. The emphasis is on quality of life, and creative workshops are as much part of the environment as medical care. We came along to talk to some of the residents.
Well, when I found out it was the morning of a wedding, I was best man. And when it came to congratulate the bride and groom, I didn't kiss the bride, because, you know, just that ignorance, you know. But later on at the wedding, you know, she come up and she says to me, "Oh, you forgot to give me a kiss, you know, Scott told me what you got diagnosed this morning and that, you know." And she just gave me a big kiss, you know.
I was getting like sprayed on my door, AIDS, bitch, things like that. I started getting threatening letters that they were going to burn me alive in my sleep and things like that. And I started getting my house broken into, videos taken.
And try to tell my partner she wanted to make love, and try to tell her, you know, we were both being drunk, she thought I was kidding and that, you know, and I just, it's hard to talk about that, but so I ended up having to get her to come down to the doctor's with me, and after I had to say to the doctor, "Look, will you tell her what I'm diagnosed as?" You know, and so he told her, and I asked her, you know, "Look, we're going to each other 6 months. If you're going to go, I'd rather you go now, you know." But she stuck by me for another 4 years, which was good.
I met a friend who was HIV, and I hadn't seen them for years. And we went to go to this pub. They would not let me in. And I don't know how they knew. Yeah, it's not as if I put a banner at my window saying, "I'm HIV, can you watch out, okay?"
How do you think Milestones helped you cope with having HIV?
If it wasn't the furthest place, you know what I mean, a lot of people, I think, would have went before their time, or not just that, it's better than a hospital. There's always like workshops if you want to go paint, there's always things going on.